Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States now owes over $38 trillion, the highest number in its history. The European Union carries around $14 trillion. Japan, almost $9 trillion. Even oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia, or export giants like Germany and China all owe massive amounts. But here's the strange part. If everyone owes money, who is everyone owing it to? Debt isn't just a weight on a nation's shoulders. It's the very structure of the modern world. Every war, every economic boom, every crisis and collapse sits on top of this invisible scaffolding made of IOUs. And if you follow those IOUs far enough, you find something a bit unsettling. The world doesn't actually owe money to someone else. It owes it to itself. But of course, that doesn't mean everyone benefits the same. To understand how we ended up with a planet drowning in more than $315 trillion of total debt, nearly 3 times the size of the entire global economy, we have to rewind. Long before credit cards or instant money transfers, the idea of national debt was born not on Wall Street, but on the battlefield. Back in 1694, England was fighting France and running out of gold. The king turned to wealthy merchants. In exchange for a steady stream of interest payments backed by future taxes, they agreed to finance the crown. To manage this brand new arrangement, the Bank of England was created. This changed everything. For the first time, a government could spend money it didn't yet have. And in return, lenders received something powerful. A government promise. One that could be traded, bought, and sold. That was the birth of the government bond. The seed that grew into our entire financial system. France copied the idea. The Netherlands improved it. The young United States adopted it to fund its revolution and later its westward expansion. National debt wasn't seen as a failure, but as a sign of credibility. If you could borrow, you could rule. Empires once conquered land to take gold. Now they issued bonds to collect interest. The battlefield shifted from land to the balance sheet. Fast forward 300 years, and debt is now the world's most universal export. The U.S. owes $38 trillion. Japan owes over $9 trillion. And global borrowing grows by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country borrows, every bank lends, and every citizen, through taxes, savings, and pensions, ends up being both a debtor and a creditor at the same time. But let's look at who's actually holding the rope on the other end. Take the United States. Its debt isn't just national, it's global. Out of its $38 trillion, about half is publicly held, meaning owed to investors rather than to the government itself. About 2/3 of those investors are American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and yes, the Federal Reserve. The remaining third, around $9 trillion, is held by foreign countries. Japan leads with about $1 trillion, followed by China with roughly $800 billion, then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So, when people say the U.S. is in debt to China, it's true, but only for about 2% of the total. Most of America's debt is actually owed to America. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating new dollars. Americans pay taxes that fund the interest on those bonds, which flows back into American retirement accounts. It's a financial mirror. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly the system itself. And this circular loop isn't unique to the U.S. It's global. Japan buys U.S. debt. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. Developing nations turn around and lend back to wealthy countries by storing their foreign reserves in Western bonds. It's basically a planet-wide game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Everyone holds someone else's IOU. Each promise is backed by another promise. It's like a poker game where everyone borrowed their chips from someone else. And the only rule is, don't leave the table. But there's another layer, the most powerful one, the markets. Behind every government bond is a network of hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks managing tens of trillions of dollars. They decide which countries borrow cheaply and which countries pay a painful price to stay afloat. When they lose confidence, currencies crash, governments fall, and entire economies can be rewritten overnight. Democracy chooses who governs. Markets choose who survives. And the most influential player in all of this? The central bank. Central banks don't just manage debt, they create it. Every time the Federal Reserve or European Central Bank buys bonds, it creates money in return. One balance sheet's liability becomes another balance sheet's asset. Every dollar in existence is basically someone else's debt. There's no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, every bill, every digital dollar has an invisible IOU stamped on it. For decades, this loop has kept going because of one thing: confidence. As long as investors believe governments will pay interest, even if they never repay the principal, the machine keeps running. But what happens when confidence cracks? We've seen the answer. In Greece in 2010, debt became unpayable. Investors panicked. Interest rates exploded. The European Central Bank and IMF stepped in, but with harsh conditions: tax hikes, spending cuts, mass unemployment. For a whole generation, bailout became a word that meant sacrifice. In Argentina, repeated defaults made debt a national curse. In Sri Lanka, fuel shortages and political collapse hit when the government ran out of foreign currency to pay its loans. When the system breaks, the creditors suddenly have faces: the IMF, rating agencies, anonymous bondholders who can squeeze entire nations. And yet, even after collapse, the same system restarts. Old debts get restructured, new loans replace them. The machine resets, same logic, new numbers. Why? Because in the modern world, debt isn't designed to be paid off. It's designed to be rolled over. Governments don't plan to pay their debt. Not today, not ever. It's not a conspiracy, it's the design. You and I are expected to repay our loans. But governments treat debt like a subscription. They keep renewing it. Economists call this refinancing. Interest is the real product, the rent paid for stability. And the global economy now depends on that rent. The system breathes by borrowing. If it stops, it suffocates. That's why the U.S. will never actually pay off its $38 trillion. It will keep refinancing it forever. Japan has rolled its debt for decades, now sitting at more than 250% of its GDP. And yet investors are still happy to lend at near zero interest. They don't want their money back. They want the safest collateral on earth. To investors, government debt isn't a burden. It's an asset. Pension funds rely on it. Banks use it as security. Central banks treat it like money itself. If governments actually paid off their debt, the world would lose its most trusted financial building block. Imagine Washington suddenly clearing its entire debt. Global banks and funds would lose their safest asset. The supply of dollars would shrink dramatically. Deflation and collapse would follow. Paying off the debt would break the system. So governments do the opposite. They keep issuing more. not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt becomes the heartbeat of capitalism, pulsing through every mortgage, pension, and financial market on Earth. That's why political promises about paying down the national debt are mostly theater. No one plans to eliminate it. The real goal is to keep it manageable, trusted, and desirable enough that the world keeps believing in it. Because once belief cracks, the numbers stop mattering. Confidence collapses, rates spike, and an economy built on promises comes to a halt. That's the truth about sovereign debt. The plan was never to repay it. The plan is to keep everyone believing it will be repaid someday. It's a closed loop of trust. And as long as that trust holds, the numbers can stretch endlessly. But here's the catch. Trust isn't shared equally. When we say we owe it to ourselves, that's only half true. Debt doesn't benefit everyone the same way. Interest payments don't trickle down. They flow upward from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors who own the debt. Debt doesn't just move money between countries. It moves money between classes. That's why global inequality rises alongside global debt. The system rewards the people who own debt and pressures the people who only pay it. This pattern repeats everywhere from imposto frento. From households to nations, creditors aren't villains, debtors aren't victims. They're two parts of the same engine. The real danger is what happens when the engine can't take on more fuel, when new borrowing can't keep up with old promises. That's when the question, who's the creditor, stops being abstract and starts being personal. And at the top of this whole structure, there's no single villain. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. It's all of them, and all of us. Debt has become money. Governments issue it. Banks multiply it. Investors trade it. Citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has faded to almost nothing. Debt once meant chains. Today it means balance. But if that balance ever breaks, if confidence runs out, the illusion ends. And we're reminded of what debt really is, a promise that can't last forever.